Welcome back everyone to the Hello World Guide. This is another episode of the Advanced Platformer series, and in this video we are going to flesh out the rest of the details of the base of our interaction system by implementing the code on the player side to kind of interact with different elements. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up this switch prefab, the actual prefab file, and in here we'll go under add component and I'll just add a new box collider 2D, and we are going to kind of move it a bit to the X because that's how we want it to be here. We want it to be kind of here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to actually reduce its size on the X and kind of position it somewhere here. You can kind of position it wherever you like, of course. I'm going to put it here, and yeah, that's pretty awesome. Perhaps a bit increase on the Y, not really. Let's just move it up on the Y a bit, just a little. Yeah, you can just fine tune the position to whatever you like. I'm going to position it here, and yes, that looks pretty good. Let's change this to 0.7. Yes, that's pretty much it. So we have got our collider here, and what we want to do is we want to now implement the code on the player side for actually interacting with this collider and this switch and making the switch do what it's supposed to do. So of course it's working right now for collision, but it's not doing what we want it to do. So for that, one thing I'm going to do, by the way, is that I'm going to select player first of all, and then go under the player's sprite, and in here I'm going to change the where we got here the sorting layer. I'm going to add a sorting layer here above default, which I'm going to call let's just call it player, because it's going to represent the player stuff, because the player should always be drawn on top of everything else. So we'll do that, and I'll go under sprite, and I'll make the sorting layer be player, and in that layer it will be at 0 position, while the weapon gun here, it will also be in player, but its order will be at 1. So we have got that. Now it should be displayed on top of the switch and every other background element. We're going to now go under file and go under, actually not under file, in edit, and then project settings, and inside of the input manager you can see we have got jump here. We are going to add another well, you can add anything. I'm going to just, for example, go under this fire 2 and rename this to interact, because well, why not. And what we are going to do is we are going to remove the alternate button here, positive and whatever we have got, and we are going to change this to be E, because whenever we press E we'll basically just go ahead and interact with something. So we'll use E for that key, and yeah, we have got that, and that's pretty awesome. So this is how we are going to interact with different elements by pressing the E button. And if I go in here, you can see that well, now we should be able to open up our player script inside of Visual Studio, and in here what we'll do is we'll use that key to kind of determine when we need to cast array to check for interactables around the player. So you can see that I have opened up my weapon aim system script here, and in here you can see that I have changed the direction or difference local variable to a property which is public, and we can get it publicly, but the set is private, which means we can only set it inside this class, and we use this direction variable instead of creating a local variable. Now what this does is that it allows us to actually obtain the direction of where we want to go here. And what we'll do is we won't actually do that, but after we are done that, we'll say direction is equal to direction dot normalize. The reason for that is that it will basically go ahead and kind of just normalize it, and it will set that to the default value, or we can just call the normalize method here, and it will make sure that its length is 1, which means it will basically be like only representing a direction and not actually the magnitude of where the mouse is. So it will only represent the direction. Let's just go in here and ensure that everything still works, and there is nothing wrong here, and our direction is still working correctly. You can see that it is working, and we still are able to move our gun around just like we were able to do it previously. So that's pretty awesome. So let's go ahead and close this down. Going here, you can see we have got that, and now we can access the direction outside as well. So what we are going to do is we have already got a serialize field, which is this, and we actually need a private weapon aim system, which we'll just call aim. For example, we won't actually call it the whole thing, and this we have got here. And when we want to actually cast array, what we'll do, we'll just say if, and we can say, for example, let's just actually, if it works, so let's go ahead and create a a condition for checking the input for the interact button. So we'll go in here and we'll say if and input actually input dot get button down. Yeah, let's make it get button down. You can make it get button as well, but get button down will only return true if the button is actually down at this moment. And we'll call this interact, just like we named it in our project settings, interact. And if this is pressed, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and cast array. So if I go ahead and say physics, you can see we've got this here, but we'll actually need to do physics 2D because this is a 2D game, dot raycast. So if I go ahead and say raycast, you can see it asks us to give it an origin and a direction. So for the origin, we'll just say we can say different things. We'll just say transform dot position, and for the direction you can say aim dot direction. So let's just do that, and that works. However, we can provide it with a lot of different stuff. We can also provide it with a maximum distance and a bunch of filters as well. So you can see we have got like a contact filter 2D to depend on what we want to actually contact with, and we have also got options for the layer mask. Now what we'll do is we'll introduce two more serialized fields up here. One is going to be a private float called distance, and the reason we are including this is because of course we don't want the player to be able to interact with anything from very far away. So we are going to set this distance by default to let's set it to, for example, 1, for example. Let's just set it to that by default, and we are going to have another private thing here, which is not going to be a float. Instead it's going to be a layer mask, because we don't want the player to actually detect itself. So we are going to call this layer mask, and we won't actually use anything. We'll won't set it to default. By default it will just be nothing. And for the distance, we'll pass in the distance we have got. And for the layer mask, you can see we have got an overload which requires an integer layer mask. So we'll have to say layer mask dot value, which is an actual integer value. So we'll just say layer mask dot value here, and yeah, that is pretty much all we need to do. It's going to give us a value of the layer mask, and we are going to do it that way. So let's let it compile and open that up. And if I go ahead and open up my players here, I'm actually going to go under switch, and I'm going to select the switch here we have got, and you can see the layer is nothing right now. We are going to add another layer, which I'm going to just user layer 3. You can see we got this here, and we can just call it for example, we can call it interactable, because this is layer is going to represent all stuff that we should actually check for raycast against, because obviously we don't want the raycast to hit the weapon. For example, we only want it to hit the actual stuff that we can interact with, like a switch, for example. So we are going to do that, and we are going to set its layer to interactable. No, this object only. We don't really need to change the children at all. And we have got our player, and you can see currently our we also need to make sure we actually provide it with the weapon aim system. And we are going to set the distance. We are going to keep it at 1. And for the layer mask, we'll just set it to interactable. So in here we are of course not going to just do a raycast and then just stop. We are going to store the result in a raycast hit 2D, which we'll just call hit, and we'll store it that. And what we are going to do is we are going to say if hit dot collider is not equal to null, which means we did hit something, because we can obviously, if there's nothing in front of the player, we won't hit anything at all. We'll say interactable, and we'll just create an interactable called interactable, just a local variable, which will set to hit dot collider dot get component interactable. If the interactable is not equal to null, we'll say interactable dot interact, and for the player we'll just pass in this, because this is a player, and that should cause the interactable to be triggered, and it should technically go ahead and try to call this interactable method, which should in turn, you can see that in button it says just I got pressed by player.name, and we should be able to get that message. Before we test this So we want to make sure that I'm going to just clear the console, and we want to make sure that we open up our switch and we actually add the switch script on this, and now it should actually cause the player to detect the button, and it should give us that debug message that we are waiting for. By default it does not do anything if I am pressing E here, but if I move here and press E, it still does not do anything, and if I move just a little bit closer and then press E, you can see it says I got pressed by player, and that works quite well. And if I just let me clear this, if I like face the other direction and then do it, or I face down all the way and then do it, it won't work, but it will only do it if I actually face the button. It will now it should, yeah, you can see now it's going to say I got pressed by player, which means it's working right now. And if I move here and press this button, or I do this here, it won't work, and if I face this and then press E, you can see it works. So yeah guys, this is pretty much it for this video. In this video we set this up, but before we actually end this video, we want to actually display this button kind of turning. So let's just this switch kind of turning, so we want to go ahead and implement that. So for that I'm going to go under switch here and open up my switch script, and in here we have got all of this, but we are going to add another serialize field. So serialize field here, like that, and it's going to be a private transform, which we are going to call just call it rotate transform. So let's call it rotate transform, and we are going to set this to that rotate the parent thing that we created in the last video. And whenever this happens, what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and say rotate transform dot rotation rotation is equal to let's say quaternion dot Euler angles, quaternion dot Euler, and what we'll do is we'll pass in not 0 0 0, instead we'll pass in 0 for the x and y, of course, because that is only for 3D. For the z, what we are going to do is we are going to say you can see, if I actually, let me open this up, you can see we have got our switch, and it's by default that rotate thing that we have got, it is set to -40. We are going to go ahead and change that to 40, and let's go ahead and try to test that out and see whether it works or not. And we are going to compile that, and if I go ahead and you can see it's compiling. If I go under switch and set this rotate transform to this rotate that I have got, you can see it does indeed set the switch to its other state as soon as we press that. So we are going to go closer to it, and then we are going to press E, and you can see that the switch does turn to kind of face down, and that means that our switch is working and the pressing mechanic is working. So yeah guys, this is pretty much it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one, in which we'll make this switch actually trigger something else in the level as well. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to like and subscribe and share this video with other people as well, and bye.